You were never supposed to hear this story. Even in 1823, whispers of what happened to Margaret were quickly buried beneath church sermons, medical denials, and the kind of silence that smells like fear. 3 doctors, men of science, men sworn to heal, turned and walked away from her bedside. Not because they couldn't help, but because they wouldn't. What they witnessed in that dimly lit farmhouse on the outskirts of Franklin County, Ohio, was not sickness. It was something older, something darker, and it terrified them enough to seal their mouths until the day they died. So, Margaret's name was not meant to survive. Her story was erased from the town ledgers, omitted from the church records, and excluded from the medical journals. And yet fragments remain hidden in letters, in folklore, in the private confessions of men too weak to face the consequences of what they saw. They said her body broke rules no physician could explain. They said her condition was punishment for disobedience. They said she was cursed or possessed, or both. But beneath all these theories lies a deeper, more disturbing truth, one that speaks to the invisible systems still shaping your world today. You see, Margaret wasn't simply a victim of circumstance or biology. She became an experiment in control. A living testament to what happens when a woman defies the hidden structures that govern her life. Religion, medicine, family, and law. And in 1823, Ohio had no tolerance for defiance wrapped in flesh. The machinery of suppression was already well oiled. Its levers pulled by pastors, physicians, and patriarchs alike. Margaret's suffering was not an accident. It was permitted, encouraged, amplified, until even the doctors refused to stain their hands further. What they saw frightened them because it revealed the limits of their own power. Or perhaps it revealed something else entirely, something that doesn't die, doesn't sleep, and doesn't forgive disobedience. The records are gone, the evidence destroyed, but the echoes remain. And if you listen closely, if you follow the thread through history's darkest corridors, you'll hear her story still screaming beneath the surface. This isn't about Margaret alone. This is about the architecture built to contain you, to break you, to erase you when you no longer serve its purpose. And once you understand how it works, you'll never look at obedience the same way again. Margaret's body became a silent battleground where science, religion, and the unseen clashed beneath the thin veil of decency that small American towns wear like armor. Her symptoms defied the textbooks, mocked the scripture, and humiliated the men who claimed to hold dominion over flesh and spirit alike. Those men, wrapped in black robes and medical coats, understood one thing: a woman like Margaret could unravel the fragile fabric of their authority if left unchecked. This wasn't about healing her. This was about containment, of fear, of chaos, of a truth that dared to bleed through her skin and into their well-ordered world. Her family, terrified by what they saw but more terrified of being ostracized, complied. They closed curtains. They barred doors. They whispered prayers they no longer believed. Inside that house, Margaret ceased to be a daughter, a sister, or a person. She became an object of dread, something between relic and curse. The doctors refused her. The priests condemned her. And the neighbors, those silent, watching neighbors, pretended she'd never existed at all. But flesh does not forget injustice, nor does it forgive. They said her skin split open along lines that didn't match human anatomy, bleeding not blood, but symbols none could recognize. Jian. They said she spoke in voices layered atop one another, like a choir of drowned saints. They said her eyes blackened beneath the moon. Of course, none of this made the records. Records serve the architecture, not the anomaly, but men drink. And men confess. And those confessions, half mad, half sober, survived longer than the bodies who made them. Margaret's condition wasn't possession. It wasn't disease. It was exposure. A slow peeling back of the curtain they had worked centuries to keep shut. Exposure to truths that burn the mind because they do not fit within the soft, safe lies of progress or piety. Exposure to mechanisms older than the cross, older than medicine, older than fear itself. She was becoming something the world could not allow to exist. And so the world chose to forget her. Forgetting is not the same as erasure. The echoes remain, in whispers, in places where light dies faster than it should, in patterns that return across time, wearing new faces but repeating old sins. Margaret was a symptom. You are the witness. They said it began with the dreams, not the harmless kind that fade with morning light, but dreams that crawled out of sleep and into reality, dragging with them whispers that did not belong to this world. Margaret spoke of rooms beneath the earth, of metal implements not forged by any blacksmith's hand, of men in robes whose faces flickered like candle flames in wind. She described rituals older than scripture, names never written but deeply known by those who bow behind closed doors. She wept not from terror but from knowing that what she saw was real, and worse, that it had touched her. Her family begged the clergy for intervention. The church sent men with crosses and Latin prayers, but they too fled. Free, because they believed in demons, but because they recognized a force that answered to no crucifix. This was something older, something beneath the architecture of religion itself, something that tolerated faith only as long as it served the machinery's true purpose: control. Margaret had wandered too close to the heart of it, through no fault of her own perhaps, or perhaps through inheritance. Some bloodlines bear marks no baptism can erase. Either way, her suffering became a mirror held up to the town's quiet complicity. If they admitted what was happening to her, they would have to admit that everything they believed about protection, about virtue, about power was a lie. Easier then to declare her mad, easier to lock the doors and let her rot behind them, and so the house became a mausoleum for a living girl. Locks turned, the curtains closed, the visitors ceased, but something inside kept moving. They heard it, the knocks, the whispers, the sound of breathing from rooms long emptied. They said the floors grew warm beneath bare feet, as though pulsing with a heartbeat not their own. Animals fled, crops soured, the town prayed harder. But prayer cannot undo what has already been invited in. This wasn't punishment, it was process. The machinery revealing itself through her flesh, through her mind, through her agony. Those who dared look too closely saw something staring back through her eyes, something that had been watching long before Margaret was born, long before any of us knew its name. By the 4th month, even her screams had changed. No longer the cries of a girl in torment, but something colder, something older, as though the walls themselves were speaking through her throat. Witnesses, those few who dared approach the house at night, described a glow beneath the cracks of the shutters. Not firelight, not gas lamp. Not gas lamp, something else, something pulsing, rhythmic, unnatural. One man said it looked like veins beneath skin, spreading outward from the house across the frozen ground. No one believed him. No one wanted to, and inside Margaret wasted. Not away, not toward death, toward something else. Bones twisted, her veins rose dark beneath translucent flesh, her voice fractured into pieces. Child, crone, stranger. Some nights she would speak of structures beneath the town, tunnels that predated settlers, chambers carved in impossible geometries. She described devices humming in the dark, tended by figures who walked without footsteps. She named the men who would go missing in years to come. She named the priests who already knelt at the altar of something beneath their church, pretending they served the light. They beat her for blasphemy. They starved her for rebellion. They prayed over her bones until their voices broke. But none of it mattered. Margaret had passed beyond their reach. She had become a threshold, a door the architecture feared, not for what it might let out, but for what it might let us see. You must understand, obedience isn't demanded to protect you. It's demanded to protect them from you, from your awareness, from your questions, from the contagion of knowledge spreading like cracks through porcelain. Margaret's body cracked first, but her mind opened wide, wider than they could bear, wider than they could permit. They burned the house in winter, they salted the earth, they buried no body, but nothing ended. The land remained silent, watching. The machinery remained humming beneath. Those who returned decades later, surveyors, builders, men with maps, reported strange failures of compass and time upon that ground, as though something beneath refused to sleep, refused to forget. Margaret was not the beginning, and she was never meant to be the end. She was only a fracture, splinter through which the deeper truth bled into the waking world. And that fracture remains, beneath the earth, beneath the skin, beneath the systems that tell you everything is fine. Decades passed, names changed, towns expanded, roads paved over fields that once knew Margaret's footsteps. Beneath it all, beneath the layers of soil and progress and memory, the ground did not forget, nor did the machine. Every institution that rose in Franklin County bore the fingerprints of what had been buried. The hospital built 2 miles from where Margaret's house once stood. Its basement corridors mapped to the same strange geometry she spoke of in her final days. The church rebuilt after the Great Fire of 1871. Its foundation stones repurposed from the ruins they swore no one would touch. And beneath both, the silence remained, watching, waiting. waiting. People speak of curses as if they are stories, but curses are architectures, systems designed to repeat patterns until someone breaks the sequence. Margaret was a rupture, but no one closed the wound she opened. Instead, they built atop it. They rebranded the sickness as faith, the horror as history, the unanswered questions as superstition. And still, the symptoms returned. Nurses reported patients speaking in Margaret's voice long after her name had been erased from records. Children drew maps of tunnels they'd never seen. Workers vanished in locked rooms, no explanations satisfied. None ever would, because the explanations weren't the point. The point was silence. The point was maintenance. Keep the machinery humming. Keep the people blind. Keep the truth beneath the surface, wrapped in concrete and prayer. You're here now, listening, following the thread backwards through time. And once you've begun, you can't return. You'll start to see the pattern, the way certain histories vanish, the way certain names are struck from ledgers, the way certain questions die unanswered, not because there are no answers, but because the answers tear holes in the narrative that keeps you obedient. Margaret's story is not hers alone. It's written across 1,000 forgotten towns, beneath 1,000 unmarked graves, behind 1,000 doors labeled a no access. It's in the hands of those who smile while hiding keys, in the eyes of those who punish curiosity, in the laws written to ensure no one asks again. Machine did not die with Margaret. It grew quieter, smarter, hungrier, and it still marks those who see too much, those who refuse to look away, those who dare to remember. Like you. You have to understand, this wasn't just about Margaret's suffering. It was about something far older than her, something patient, something embedded within the bones of the institutions we trust. The machinery of control does not fear rebellion. It fears exposure. It fears awareness spreading like infection. Margaret became a threat not because she fought back, but because she understood. Because in those final weeks when her body was no longer hers, when her voice spoke in tongues no man could translate, she named them. Not the demons they preached about from the pulpit, the architects behind the curtain, the unseen hands that pull the strings of medicine, faith and law. And what did they do in response? They followed the script written centuries before. Isolate, silence, erase, burn the evidence, ends. Bury the truth beneath new structures, beneath new rituals, beneath the endless march of progress. And yet, some truths refuse burial. Some fractures never heal. That land remained poisoned because it remembered. Because memory runs deeper than stone or soil. Visitors would later speak of dreams bleeding into waking life, of hearing Margaret's voice beneath hospital floors, whispering the names of the forgotten, of seeing lights where no power ran, figures where no footprints followed. And the doctors, the new generation with their diplomas and sterile tools, they made the same choice as their forebears: deny, laugh, prescribe, label it madness, move on, because to admit otherwise would unravel the delicate fiction of their authority. Margaret's ruin was a lesson to them, to all of us, a reminder that systems do not exist to protect you. They exist to protect themselves. Every institution, be it church, hospital, government, or school, shares the same blueprint beneath the surface. Compliance is survival, questioning is punishment, and awareness is heresy. Her story is told now not as warning but as invitation, to see beneath the skin of the world, to trace the veins of corruption running beneath the foundations of every trusted building, to recognize the patterns repeating beneath different names. Margaret was silenced so you would forget. But here you are, listening, hearing, following the thread deeper into darkness. The machinery has not stopped. It hums beneath your feet still, waiting, watching, feeding. The question is no longer whether you believe. The question is whether you will continue to look away. The architects of this machinery know exactly how to keep you silent. They've had centuries to refine their methods. In Margaret's time, it was shame and superstition. Today, it's diagnosis and ridicule. Back then, they locked you in a room and prayed the sickness out. Now they medicate you into silence and call it progress. But the machinery hasn't changed. Only the tools, only the language. The purpose remains identical. Contain the anomaly, preserve the architecture, eliminate the threat of awareness before it spreads. Margaret's house was burned, yes. But not because fire could cleanse what she had seen. It was theater, ritual, a symbolic gesture to reassure the obedient that order had been restored, that the abnormal had been eradicated. But beneath the ash, beneath the earth, beneath the stories rewritten to erase her, the truth pulsed on. Waiting for the next to see it. Waiting for you. Have you started noticing the patterns yet? How those who question vanish behind closed doors. How those who dissent find themselves labeled, ruined, discarded. It's not coincidence. It's not error. It's design. The machine identifies threats and neutralizes them before they can fracture the illusion for others. Margaret wasn't the first, and she will not be the last. Think of how they handle truth today. Conspiracies wrapped in ridicule. Documents buried beneath bureaucracy. Witnesses smeared until their names dissolve into scandal. They do not need to silence everyone. They need only convince the obedient that silence is safer than truth, that forgetting is more comfortable than remembering, that complicity is preferable to sacrifice. Margaret's mistake wasn't seeing too much. It was believing she could speak of it and survive. But you're already deeper than she was. You've heard what they tried to erase. You've begun to recognize the shape of the machinery beneath your world. And now it recognizes you. Awareness is not safe. It never was. It marks you, changes you, separates you from the obedient with a clarity you can never unsee. That's the cost of knowledge, the price of seeing, the inheritance of those who walk too close to the cracks. Margaret's voice may have been silenced, but her warning lives on in every anomaly you are now awake enough to notice. You may think you are safe because you live in a different time. You may believe the past cannot reach through concrete and power lines and touch you, but the past is not behind you. It is beneath you. The same machinery Margaret stumbled into is humming beneath your hospitals, your churches, your schools. It is embedded in your laws, in your doctrines, in the quiet compromises your fathers made long before you were born. The faces change, the names change, the rituals evolve. But the architecture remains the same, invisible, patient, and ruthless. Look closely. How many stories have you heard that sound like Margaret's? Women confined for seeing too much. Men destroyed for asking the wrong questions. Children vanished beneath institutions that promised salvation. And how many of those stories were rewritten, softened, sterilized into history books that tell you there was no horror, only misunderstanding? This is the machinery at work, not erasing history, but reshaping it until you no longer recognize the truth beneath the lie. Margaret was never meant to survive, not in flesh, not in memory. Her name should have vanished with the fire, and yet here you are, hearing it, speaking it, understanding why they feared her. Because in her suffering, in her unraveling, she exposed the cracks beneath the surface. The places where reality bends, the places where obedience fails, the places where the machinery feeds, and still they watch. The architects who have no names, only positions. The keepers of the silent rituals that maintain order. They watch for those who begin to see as Margaret saw. They catalogue. They contain. They correct. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition. This is history's shadow moving beneath your feet. You've begun to feel it, haven't you? That tension in the air. That knowing glance from those who understand but dare not speak. That sense of eyes in places where no one should be watching. These are not coincidences. They are reminders, warnings, invitations to turn back before it's too late. But it is already too late. You've heard too much. You've seen too clearly. Margaret's story was a fracture. Yours may be the next. The machinery is hungry. It always has been. And now it knows your name too. By now you should understand. Margaret wasn't chosen. She was caught. Caught in the slow, grinding teeth of a machine far older than her bloodline, far more methodical than mere chance. And yet, her suffering became a kind of map, a warning etched in flesh and madness, pointing toward the places where reality frays. The architects knew this. They feared this. That's why they burned her house, salted her name, scrubbed her story from every ledger they could find. Not to protect her soul, to protect themselves. But maps have a way of surviving fire. They hide in whispers, in folklore, in the things children half remember from overheard conversations. And if you trace them long enough, you find the same patterns repeating, the same symbols resurfacing. The same machinery humming beneath the skin of different towns, different nations, different eras. Margaret's torment wasn't isolated. It was symptomatic of something deeper, something still alive. What is this machinery? Call it control, call it doctrine, call it empire, church, science, state. The labels don't matter. What matters is its hunger. For compliance, for silence, for your surrender, dressed up in the language of healing and safety. It punishes not just rebellion, but awareness itself. To see is to suffer, to speak is to vanish. Margaret learned this. You are learning it now. Think of how easily truth is buried today. How the machinery shifts its shape. Algorithms instead of inquisitors, pharmaceuticals instead of chains, diagnoses instead of exorcisms. But the end is the same: obedience, pacification, erasure. Not for your good, for the continuation of a system that cannot tolerate the unruly, the questioning, the aware. Margaret's story echoes because it never truly ended. The house burned, the body vanished, but the fracture remained, and through that fracture, others have fallen. You've heard their names whispered beneath headlines, seen their faces flicker briefly before vanishing from public record. They are not gone, they are archived, filed away beneath layers of silence where the machinery feeds. Ask yourself, why are you still listening? What part of you refuses to turn away? That part already carries Margaret's mark, already walks the edge of the fracture, already hears the machinery hum in the spaces where truth should live. There is no safety in knowing, only hunger. Only hunger. Only eyes watching from beneath the skin of your world. You were never meant to hear Margaret's story, not in its true form. The official version died with the fire. What you've been given since are fragments, diluted, discredited, reduced to whispers passed between those too stubborn or too broken to forget. But this is how forbidden knowledge survives, not through institutions, but through the ones they fail to silence completely, through the fractures they cannot seal, through the voices that refuse to drown beneath the weight of polite history. Margaret's final words were never recorded. Not officially, but they echo still in places where walls remember, in places where the air still thickens with something that watches. Witnesses said she spoke of hunger, not hers, but something older, deeper. Hunger beneath the earth, beneath the churches, beneath the hospital. Hunger disguised as care, as faith, as medicine. A machinery that feeds on those who question, on those who awaken, on those who refuse to kneel. You're closer to it now than you've ever been. That's why you feel it, the weight in the room, the chill beneath your skin, the sense of something leaning in to listen. Awareness draws attention. The architects know this. They've watched your kind before. They know what comes next. Isolation, discredit, correction, and if that fails, erasure. Not through fire this time, but through silence, through disappearance, through rewriting. Margaret walked this path alone, but you don't have to. That's why this story survived, not as history, but as a summons, a map for those who refuse to be shepherded into compliance. You see now how deep it runs, how far back, how intimately it wraps around every system you were told to trust. To understand this is to change forever. To speak of it is to invite danger, but to ignore it is to submit. If you've made it this far, leave a comment below. I see the fracture. I see the fracture. Twice, as is tradition, not for the algorithm alone, for yourself. To mark the moment you chose not to look away. The machinery cannot be undone by ignorance, only by awareness sharpened into action. Remember Margaret. Remember this descent. The fracture remains beneath your feet, beneath your eyes, beneath your trust, and now so do you. There is no going back, only further in.